With a steady hand, President Trump raised the photograph, the light catching the glossy finish. A woman in the front row gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as the image on the giant screen became clear. That's Rachel Maddow, someone whispered, and a tidal wave of murmurs crashed through the stunned silence of the auditorium. The air in the university hall was thick with carefully manufactured tension. It was a CNN presidential town hall, and the network had spared no expense. The lighting was dramatic, the set a sleek blend of steel and blue-tinted glass, and the hand-picked audience was primed for a showdown. President Donald J. Trump, the 47th President of the United States, sat alone on a stool, a picture of calm at the center of a media-built storm. For weeks, the liberal press led by the endlessly smug Rachel Maddow on MSNBC had hammered a single narrative, that Trump's new American heartland economic policies were a disaster for the working class. Night after night, Maddow presented skewed charts and featured carefully edited interviews with people who claimed to have lost everything. It was a campaign of demoralization, carefully crafted to break the spirit of the American people, and tonight was meant to be its grand finale. The moderator, a veteran journalist known for his confrontational style, turned to the audience with a practiced pause. "We have a question now from Sarah Miller," he announced, his voice dripping with theatrical sympathy. Sarah is a single mother and a small business owner from just outside Philadelphia. Sarah, please. A woman with tired eyes and a well-rehearsed tremble in her voice stood up. She clutched the microphone like a lifeline. "Mr. President," she began, her voice cracking perfectly on cue. I owned a small bakery. It was my dream. I poured my life savings into it. For 3 years, we were the heart of our little town." She paused, drawing a shaky breath as the cameras zoomed in to capture a single tear rolling down her cheek. The audience leaned in, captivated. "But since your American Heartland plan, everything has changed," she continued, her voice now rising with indignation. "The costs went up. My customers lost their jobs. Last month, I had to close my doors forever. My dream is dead." She looked directly at him, her eyes both pleading and accusatory. "Mr. President, you promised to fight for people like me, but your policies destroyed me. What do you have to say to families like mine, the ones you've left with nothing?" A wave of sorrowful murmurs swept through the audience. A woman in the back sniffled loudly. On the screen, the chyron read, "A mother's dream, a president's failure." It was the perfect ambush. The moderator turned to Trump with a flicker of triumph in his eyes, expecting fury, expecting the bluster, the defensive tirade. The Trump the media had spent years constructing. But what he got was something entirely different. President Trump didn't bristle. He didn't lash out. He simply listened, his expression thoughtful, almost serene. When Sarah finished, he nodded slowly. The silence lingered, heavy and uncomfortable. Then he spoke. "Sarah," he said, his voice calm and steady, slicing through the tension. "Thank you for your question. That's a powerful and heartbreaking story." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Then he tilted his head slightly. "Also a very familiar one," he continued, a new edge sharpening his voice, precise, deliberate. "You look familiar, Sarah. Tell me, is your aunt still enjoying her corner office at 30 Rockefeller Plaza?" The question hit like a grenade. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Sarah's expression, once a picture of tragic victimhood, froze. Her eyes darted from Trump to the moderator, the carefully rehearsed sorrow now replaced by raw panic. The audience stirred, confused murmurs rising into a restless buzz. "Wait, Trinta hockey, isn't that?" someone whispered. "Who's her aunt?" Heads turned. Whispers turned into suspicion. The moderator, clearly blindsided, stumbled over his response. "Mr. President, that's an inappropriate and personal attack. Please stick to Miss Miller's economic concerns." But Trump wasn't listening. His gaze stayed locked on Sarah. It's a simple question, he pressed, voice cold as steel. You came here to question me before the nation. Surely you can answer one in return. How is your aunt? Rachel Maddow. The name dropped like a thunderclap. Chaos erupted. The auditorium exploded into shouts, some people pointing at Sarah, others staring at the stage in disbelief. Sarah Miller, or whoever she really was, stood frozen, pale, her mask shattered. She looked like a cornered animal, and this was only the first blow. President Trump wasn't just refuting a claim tonight, he was exposing a carefully staged deception. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, but the denial was weak, almost pitiful. You don't, Trump replied, his voice laced with a quiet, almost pitying tone. He reached into his jacket, not for a chart, not for a policy paper, but for a folded letter. My office received a letter last week, the president said, his voice steady and sincere. It was from a man in your hometown, a real small business owner. He runs a hardware store, and he was worried about you. The auditorium fell silent again, the tension thick. He wrote that a woman who he now recognizes says you came into his store about a month ago. You weren't buying supplies for a bakery. You were asking him, and other local shop owners, if they'd be willing to appear on television to talk about how my policies had supposedly hurt them. He said a producer from a major news network was offering to pay them for their time. Trump slowly unfolded the letter and held it up. He said he refused. He told me, our town is struggling, but we are not for sale. And he was writing to me because he feared the media wasn't coming to report the truth, but to manufacture a lie. At that moment, a man in the front row wearing a Made in the USA cap shot to his feet. That's right, he shouted. They don't care about us. The sentiment spread like wildfire. The crowd was no longer just watching, they were part of something bigger. They were the ones being mocked, their hardships twisted into political theater. Trump let the energy build, the outrage swirl, then calmly delivered the final blow. But you know, he said, folding the letter and slipping it back into his pocket. A letter can be dismissed, a story can be spun, but a picture. Trump paused, his voice firm and deliberate. A picture is worth 1,000 words. He gave a subtle nod to his aide offstage. Moments later, a massive image appeared on the giant screen behind him. It was a candid holiday photo, warm lighting, a lavishly decorated Christmas tree, a group of people smiling, toasting with champagne flutes, and in the center, arm draped affectionately around the so-called struggling single mother, was none other than Rachel Maddow. They weren't reporter and victim, they were aunt and niece, laughing together at a family gathering. The image shattered the illusion. The auditorium erupted. The noise was deafening, a surge of outrage, betrayal, and vindication, all at once. People pointed at the screen, then at the trembling woman in the aisle, then back to the president. Standing steady and unmoved, exposed and humiliated, Sarah dropped the microphone and shoved her way through the crowd, her exit as chaotic as her unraveling. The furious crowd parted as she fled, her face buried in her hands, shame clinging to her like a shadow. The moderator stood frozen, his face ashen. His ambush hadn't just failed, had backfired spectacularly, live in front of millions. President Trump stood silently, waiting for the roar to die down, his expression somber. He didn't gloat. He didn't need to. He had simply revealed the truth piece by painful piece. Then he pivoted, turning the media's weapon back on them with devastating clarity. He didn't speak to the moderator. He spoke directly to the cameras, directly to the American people. What you just saw is the sickness at the heart of our country, he began, his voice steady and filled with moral gravity. They don't want to help the struggling, they want to use the struggling. They find a person's pain, shove a microphone in their face, and twist it into a weapon against their own country. He paused, letting the weight of that truth settle across the stunned auditorium. This was never about a bakery in Pennsylvania. It was about a narrative cooked up in a boardroom in New York City to make you feel hopeless, to convince you your country is broken, your neighbors are your enemies, and your president doesn't care. He gestured to the empty spot where Sarah had once stood. But we are not their props. We are not their pawns. And then, with perfect timing, he announced a new small business tax credit, a real policy for real people, transforming a staged attack into a genuine moment of hope. The crowd erupted into thunderous applause, not just clapping, but rising in a wave of gratitude and respect. Then he held up the photo one last time, not with anger, but with sorrow. They don't want to report the news anymore, he said. They want to be the news. The room fell into reverent silence, and then came the final line, calm, powerful, unforgettable. But I'm the president, and the only family business I care about is the American family. The mic drop moment hit like a hammer. The ovation that followed wasn't just loud, it was seismic, a declaration. The truth had won. The hero had stood his ground, not with rage, but with strength, intelligence, and an unshakable faith in the people he was elected to serve.